Welcome back, my friends, to what is likely the most ambitious video I have, ever done. You'll notice I started a brand new account. It's M4T Hyperroll, it's a river sprite. I didn't realize until about halfway through that you could look at it and think it's Math Hyperroll. But it's not. It's M4T, standing for Mission for Tuition, and you know what the channel's about, so please like, comment, and subscribe. Do anything to help the algorithm, especially for this video. I worked really hard on it. Now, I have been telling my family and friends for a while now that there is one build that you can force every single game and get to hyper in just a few days. And so I decided to try and prove it. And that build is the Astral Bruiser swiftshot build. I've done a video on it. Link is up above. Now, I am going to show you highlights from most of the games that I played. Why only most? Well, there are a couple of games that got interrupted. I'll explain a little later, but one of them involved a 911 call and me having to deal with police. But I will be making sure to show you all of the highlights, all of the main augments, and what took us through. But before that, let's go over the build. In this build, we use Astral, so you're going to start with Skarner, Nidalee, and Vladimir, or whatever Astral you can get, and you use them to try to get to Varus, Illaoi, and Skarner. Your key items for Varus are Deathblade, Rageblade, and Runan's Hurricane, and we'll take a break and look at augments. All three of these augments are good for this build. Best Friends is really good because of the way you can position your champions, so it's going to enhance the swift shots. Thrill of the Hunt would have also been good, as well as Triforce, since your two main carries are both 3 costs. But early on in this build, your goal is just to pick up your 3 Astrals and get swift shots who are going to fill in. You use Nidalee as the item carrier for all things that you need for Varus. Again, Deathblade, Rageblade, Runan's Hurricane are your top 3 items. I tend to put tank items onto Skarner or Illaoi if I get her early. For the second set of augments in this game, I get the chance for a healing augment, which I will take pretty much any time I'm offered it. And that's because if my front line gets weaker, this will help them out and allow them to keep everything in place so my swift shots can get more into them. Now let's talk about the second half of this comp, which is really the bruisers. You're looking for very specific bruisers, and that is Ornn, because Ornn will trigger Tempest with Ezreal. You're looking for Shen, and that will make sense in a moment, and then of course Illaoi and Skarner. Shen comes in because your 4th swift shot is going to be Xayah. She will replace Ashe. Then you can bring in Hecarim at the end, and that will then give Xayah Rage Wing, which will increase her attack speed and also allow her to pick up Omnivamp. Let's look at the final set of augments for this game. I decided to go with the Portable Forge, hoping for something absolutely fantastic. I could have grabbed the Infinity Force for Xayah, but decided to get Randium Sanctum to put on Ornn, just to make those 2 champions a little tankier. Normally, you want that for when you're going to clump people together, but it's so important to have Ornn strong that I wanted to do that. This game ultimately came down to the fact that I didn't take a Hecarim earlier when I had the chance. I generally like to focus on trying to get to my 3 stars first, and then I never saw another Hecarim again, so I had to go without Hecarim and just went for Bard. It ended up with me finishing in 2nd place instead of 1st, but it's still a pretty good start. For the start of Game 2, I want to talk a little bit about the Carousel. I am looking for Astrals with the right item. Here, there is Vlad with a bow or Nidalee with a sword. Either one would be perfect. I avoid the Skarner with the needlessly large rod because I would want that to go on Varus. So I want it to be a champion that I'm going to be willing to take out. In this case, Nidalee serves the purpose perfectly because I can put the Deathblade on her, I can put the Rageblade or anything I want on her. She's coming out of the game the moment I can find a Varus. For the first augment, this is my favorite one. The 700 health Thrill of the Hunt nearly always leads me into the top 4, simply because the swift shots are going to be able to take out enough people that it will keep them up to keep them doing damage. And since Rageblade and Runin's Hurricane are part of Varus's kit for this, you're going to be able to keep him alive a long time. Again, your goal is to get yourself up to the 3 astrals. Don't take them above 2 stars. Don't try to go for gold on anything but Skarner with your starting astrals. They're just item holders for Varus and Alawi as you go forward. For the second set of augments in this match, I get the prismatic level, and there's nothing here I love. Roll, and nothing there I love. So I decide to just get Windfall, because gold will matter as later on when I try to get my Varus and my Alawi. Notice I had made a Rage Blade on Vladimir since he originally had the needlessly large rod, picked up a bow, put it on, but as soon as I get Varus, can sell Vlad off and put the Rage Blade onto Varus. For the final augment, Titanic Strength is a decent one because you are running a front line of bruisers. You don't need the component grab bag, especially with the treasure dragon coming up, because all we're going to need is one more item on Varus to complete this. Now this is how I like my final setup to look. I have my 4 bruisers out front along with Hecarim. I have Varus in one corner and Xayah in another, so I'm getting damage from both sides. Together they are able to tear teams apart, get tank items onto Alawi or onto Skarner, whichever way it works out, but they will hold the front line and hold everything in place while your swift shots do the damage. This second game again came down to getting first or second place. I was a little concerned because my prismatic augment was not one that I was really thrilled with. I'm usually guaranteed getting my 3-star units anyway, and so I wish it had been more effective, but Thrill of the Hunt is so strong, it can keep the team alive, and in this case, allowed me to get the victory. So second game, I get first place. Game 3 Carousel wasn't so friendly. I couldn't get an Astral off of it with an item that I wanted, so I just grabbed someone with a Giant's Belt that I could ultimately get onto Skarner. Now, you'll see this is where having to force builds is sometimes a little frustrating, because, oh boy, did I want to do a Volibear build, but that would ruin this entire series, and so I have to just say goodbye to them and start building my Astral team. Looking at the first set of augments, for me, Weak Spot is an easy pick, and we'll get more into this later as I feel like I found what are obviously the best set of augments for this build. For the second set of augments, I'm running in the middle of the pack and I'm offered the Bruiser Heart. I decide to go ahead and take it because it's workable in this comp, although you might end up giving up Rage Wing at the end to go to 6 Bruisers instead of staying at 5 and then bringing in a Hecarim. It's not the worst idea in the world, but not the best either. But I'd rather save my roll for when there's absolutely nothing workable. Put the Warmogs onto Skarner, because if I can get that and a Dragon Claw, it's a pretty good combination for him. For the third augment, I really get torn between taking Ascension, which is a great augment for this, or rolling and trying to find a healing augment. I like to have a healing augment like Thrill of the Hunt or Second Wind or something like that, but Ascension is just so good if the front line can hold up. It can help you get to the win. Towards the end of this match, I managed to 3-star my Alawi, and I have a magnetic remover so I can take the items off of Skarner and put them onto Alawi. Alawi is going to be a better tank overall, but the real problem I've run into is, if you notice, I have a Zoe in the back instead of an Ornn in the front. And also, I'm running into a lot of other Astral teams, so I'm unable to get my Varus up to the 3 stars necessary for the items to really matter. This one's running an ASOL, so they'll be able to do a lot of damage, but luckily I have just enough power, especially with that Ascension, that I'm able to finish them off. After eliminating that Astral player, I was able to get my Varus up to 3 stars, but I was unable to get a 2-star Ornn or ever find a Hecarim, because they're all here, to get Rage Wing going. So unfortunately, my team wasn't quite exactly what I wanted it to be, and I end up going out in 3rd place. As we head into Game 4, you can see him quickly climbing at 1428 and into green as we head to a Tactician's Crown game. And this game is a little more wild, so I'll show you a bit more of it, but we're going to grab an Astral right off the start because obviously we want at least our 3 Astrals. For the first augment, I'm going to go ahead and take the healing one. I like Thrill of the Hunt a lot better, especially the 700 one, but at least this will give my champions some ability to heal. As of this point, I still only have the original Astral, so I'm going to want to look for the 2 more so I can start my Astral build. Without those 3 Astrals, at least at the beginning, you're going to have a problem. So we find Vladimir, put him in, we have our 3 Astrals, throw in a swift shot, and we're good to go. For the second set of augments, the first offering just does not work. Late game specialists might be good for some comps, not for this one. You need your 3 stars prior to that. So roll, go ahead and grab the Bruiser Heart because I already have sort of enough of the items that are on Nidalee that I can now transfer over to Varus so that I feel comfortable not having to go with Pandora's items in order to get what I need on him. For the third augment, I get offered a healing augment, Second Wind, which, like I said, is pretty good, especially now that I'm running Bruiser Heart, and with the Tactician's Crown, I'm hopeful to be able to get up to the 6 Bruisers. Unfortunately, my confidence in getting all my Varus items was a little overrated, as I was not able to get the Rage Blade, and it kept me way down at the bottom of the health charts for a long time. I had to rely on everything else keeping me in, and luckily having that extra player allowed me to get Rage Wing a little bit earlier so that Xayah could take over the control of the match. And through a whole bunch of putting together items and reforming, I am able to get the Rage Blade onto Varus, but I'm not able to find a Hecarim to finish out the Rage Wings the way I want to, or even a 2-star Swain. So my team is not quite as strong as I would like, and running against Tactician's Crowns with Ornn items, especially on a Corki like that, is going to be almost impossible, so I end up going out in 3rd place. We're now into Game 5, which is the end of our placement matches, and as you can see from the pre-lobby, they're putting me in with blues and high greens, where I am, well, the lowest player on the team. But that's because I've won a lot, and so they figured out that this person might not be exactly where they're supposed to be. Again, if you want to force this build, the strategy in the lobby: find an Astral with an item you want. There's a Nidalee with a sword, which is one part of the Deathblade, so I'm going to go for that. Or I could have gone for the Vladimir with the rod and then put a bow on it and turn it into a Rage Blade. Either one of those would work because they're getting out of the build as soon as possible, and you can put in Varus in their place. First set of augments, I get Preparation, which is certainly something I like in this build because you spend a lot of time with your champions on the bench, so they are usually able to be fully prepared, except for some of your secondary swift shots like Ezreal or Ashe that you may pick up early, and they won't spend enough time on the bench to get fully prepared. Your key champions, Varus and Alawi, they will. Second set of augments gave me the opportunity to pick up a weak spot, which for me again in this build is a no-brainer. You're using mostly swift shots, and so any chance they have to knock down an opposing team's armor, you're going to take it. I've switched in the Ezreal, who is fully prepared to pull Ashe out so she can get another line of preparation in before going back into the match. For the final augment, I'd really like to get a healing augment, but I'm torn between rolling and possibly getting nothing, or Sunfire Board, which can be very useful. It's going to essentially cancel out the Sunfire Cape that I currently have on Skarner, but since I'm running Weak Spot, it will allow the teams to go down even faster. And with full preparation, heading into all of these champions, they're going to be attacking a lot stronger. Notice I only have a single item on Varus right now, just before the Treasure Dragon round, and not too many components, so I'm really hoping I can put something together. And sadly, the Treasure Dragon was not that helpful, so I decided to go insane with Varus, put on 2 Death Blades. That, along with full preparation, the Sunfire board, and weak spot, I'm hoping is going to allow him to absolutely dominate and take teams down really, really fast. And while I really like to have healing as a part of this build, sometimes just as much damage as humanly possible is the answer. With Sunfire board and weak spot, we are tearing through teams really quickly, and as you can see, this one is dispatched in 12 seconds, and that leads us to a second victory in our first 5 games, which are our promo matches. We didn't get anything under 3rd place, so we're doing pretty well. I want to take a moment and show you sort of where that has left us at this point as we try to climb to Hyper. Early on, you get lots of points, so this first place gets you 356, and we end at 1956 from our promo matches. Now that we're out of our promo matches, things start getting real. We can actually lose LP if we fall out of the top 4, but I'm hoping that this build will just continue to hold up. Again, always look for an Astral with an item that will be useful for you. The things I try to avoid is getting a Skarner with a Varus item on them, or basically any champion with an item like a Tear or a Sparring Glove, since they don't fit into the build at all. Giant's Belt and Chain Vest can be made into a Sunfire Cape, and then of course you have the Rod, the Bow, and the Sword, which are all useful in this build. Our first set of augments in this is Prismatic, which is not always my favorite thing, but I will take Celestial Blessing 3 because it's a lot of healing. Though again, I still like the 700 Thrill of the Hunt better. For our second set of augments, I did not like the first offerings at all. Tome of Traits could be used, but I'd rather just try my luck. And I get the Intercosmic Gifts, which is one of my favorites here. You don't find it too often, but what it will do is give you a 50% chance of getting an additional orb along with your Astral Orb, and that will have an item component or champion in it. It makes it much, much, much easier to get all your Varus items together. Again, once you find a Varus, you take out who's ever holding the items, and put Varus in their place, and give Varus whatever you have at that point. And just to show you quickly how useful the gifts are, there we go. We get the bow. That's going to be able to be turned into a Runin's Hurricane, which can go straight onto Varus, because we already had the Negatron Cloak, so we can grab it and go. For our third set of augments, we don't have the ability to roll out of them, but Big Friend is pretty good, especially since we're running bruisers in front. This will allow them to take less damage, stay up longer, which of course allows our backline to do more damage. One of the fears I always have whenever I see a prismatic augment come out is know that someone got new recruit, which means they're going to have an advantage on everyone else. And while I'm able to get into the top 2 on this one with a new recruit team with Stand United and just that much extra damage on the board, there is not really much chance for me to win. Although my team does give it an absolutely awesome try, it still ends up with a second place finish, which isn't bad. It's positive LP, and a lot of it. Unfortunately, the next game had to be scrapped because, remember I told you at the beginning of this, there was a point where I had to call 911 and deal with the police. Yeah, it was in the middle of that game, or more towards the beginning of that game, so it ended up as a 7th place finish with me never coming back to the computer. Nothing really dangerous happened. Someone just broke into the backyard area and then tried to get into the place. I heard them banging on the door, saw them in the back, called 911. They ended up leaving, and the police had to come and check everything out. So everything was fine, but kind of ruined the match. Here you can see I'm going to go ahead and make a Rage Blade on Vladimir, just because, again, he can come out for Varus at any time. The real problem is that when you get a 7th place after playing so well for so long, you get punished really hard. So we got set back by about 100 points, and it's going to be a little more difficult to make it up. So let's go ahead and look at the first set of augments we get here, and Weak Spot. That's the one to take in those 3. Even though there is a healing one, again, If it's not Thrill of the Hunt and I see Weak Spot, I'm going to grab Weak Spot. For the second augment, absent a healing one, I see Best Friends, I'm going to grab it. Again, for this build, it works really well because you can put your bruisers in 2 groups up front, and then you can also take your swift shots and move them into 2 groups in each corner. You start off like this with Skarner and Illaoi together, and then Varus and whoever else is your other swift shot at that point together. You'll ultimately have Varus and Xayah on opposite ends, so you're doing the most damage possible, and then 4 bruisers up front, and then Hecarim hopefully just in the middle on his own, creating Rage Wing. For the third set of augments, I would have loved to have gotten a healing one, but preparation, especially with what else I have in Weak Spot and Best Friends, is going to work out great. It's going to increase the attack on a lot of my champions, although not necessarily on Twitch and Ezreal, because they're already 2 stars and I'm not necessarily planning on taking them up to 3. But it's going to increase the damage on Varus, on Illaoi, on our main champions, and along with Weak Spot and Best Friends, they'll be attacking for more damage and faster. With this set of augments, this is how you want your final board to look. Your bruisers are going to be getting their increased attack speed and their increased armor, and your swift shots are going to be getting their increased attack speed. I keep Varus and Xayah separated unless the opposing team is clumped into one side. But you can see this allows them to have good targets far away that we can get through and ultimately win the match. And this probably would have been a promotion match if it had not been for the previous one that we had to stop, but those kind of things happen and you just keep on. In the next game, the game was seeing me really stingy in terms of giving me Astrals, so I decided to bypass preparation, which is a great augment for this, and try for the random chance of tier 3 champions, hoping that I would get the Astrals I need. Nope. 2 Volibears and an Anivia, and it makes me want to do a Volibear build again. But now I'm going to have to hunt to get my 3 Astrals that I need in order to set this up properly. Once I can get Nidalee, I'll at least have the right group together so that then I can get the proper shops going forward. So the first augment was a bust, but it did get me some extra gold because I could sell them. This time I go for Ascension because, as I mentioned, that is very good once you get the entire front line in place, since your back line will get stronger and thus do more damage. This game was being really tricky because I hadn't picked up a Varus until just before round 7, but then I get Press the Attack as an augment, and when you can get this, grab it. It makes every 3rd attack do additional true damage to the champion they are hitting based on their health. And just to give you an idea of how close this particular game got to going south, I had not gotten a Xayah by stage 8 nor an Ornn, so I'm using a Hecarim in my front line. I don't have a 3-star Varus yet, and I only have 2 health, so I am just clinging into this game at this point. And one thing I like about this build that I mentioned in my original video is that once it comes together, it really comes together. And you can see that I have clung with 2 health all the way on. There's still someone with 18 health in the game, but when I get through this person, it will turn into a 1v1 against that one remaining player who I'll have to get through at least 3 times. And there are many games in this series of videos that I'm showing you where they could be cut out to their own individual videos to show lots of things. This person made the mistake of stacking most of their team off to the right, so I am able to put all of my damage off to the left, and that allows them to power up even more, attack faster. With Press the Attack, they're going to be able to get through things, and while it looks really ugly, Varus is so strong, he holds on for the win. And this game, with this victory, finally helps make up for the game where I had to call the police and walk away from the computer and all of that. Again, everything was fine. It was just a disturbing moment, but It finally helps us make up for those points that we lost and will lead us to our promotion. And so we go up to blue and we're about halfway to our goal. But if you've done this, you know it's not really the halfway point, because the amount of points you're going to get going forward keeps shrinking. And as you can see, even though we're just newly minted into blue, Riot has decided, hey, we're going to throw some hyper-level players into your next game. As always with the carousel, my goal is right champion, right item. So that Skarner with a bow is not what I'm looking for, but the Vladimir with a rod will be perfect because I can use that to turn into a Rage Blade. The first set of augments are certainly not friendly to the build I'm going to force, but I can make use of the Guild Crest because it will give me a Twitch, but it will also give me 3% Omnivamp across the entire team. And as I mentioned before, healing augments are very useful, although Thrill of the Hunt remains my favorite. For the second set of augments, it is prismatic level, but nothing I really love, especially for this build, so we're going to roll it and hope. I'd love to get an increased team size, but Best Friends is a really strong augment for this, so the prismatic level of it, I'm really hoping is going to be even better. We're holding on in the middle of the pack when the third augment comes up, and unfortunately we can't roll these, so I'm going to go ahead and look at the Tome of Traits and see what we might be able to get out of it. The Rage Wing could be incredibly useful because then I won't have to get Hecarim as my last champion, since I'll be able to get to the 3 Rage Wing with just bringing in Shen. This will leave me open to potentially bringing in healing, something like Soraka as my last champion, so that I can keep myself in the match. And bringing in Soraka is exactly what we do, but we have not yet 2-starred the Ornn, so our front line is not as strong as it could be. Having Ornn up at 2 stars is really key because you want him to cast multiple times and be able to knock things up. He's only able to get off 1 cast in this case before he goes down, so they're able to get into our backline. But luckily, because Soraka casts, we now have 7 health and can survive. But in reality, this team we're against is really, really strong with the Golden Nevia, so while we're probably not going to win, we can at least ensure 2nd place thanks to Soraka. And this one goes as pretty much as I expected, in that we were able to eliminate the 3rd place and bring it down to a 1v1. Soraka was critical in bringing us there, and we did get the 2-star Ornn, but that Anivia with multiple healing items at 3 stars and Legend is just too much. And while Varus and Xayah working together can wipe out most of their team, it's not enough to finish off Anivia, and we end up in 2nd place. Our next game starts off with a spatula, so I am looking for pretty much any Astral at this point because that's what I need in the match, and then I'm thinking hopefully I can get one of the Earth Specials or some other spatula so I can make a Tactician's Crown and maybe again bring a Soraka into the game to help heal me. For the first set of augments, I see Thrill of the Hunt, so I'm going to get it. Obviously, I like the 700 version better, but this one will do. I just have to go looking for all of my Astrals so I can be complete. And unfortunately, this is one of those games where it's going to be incredibly stingy with Astrals. I'm hoping to find a Skarner as I go through, but with 1 roll left, I am able to 2-star the Nidalee, but I don't yet have the Skarner. So at this moment, I'm just going to make the best board possible, which will be putting out my 2-star champions, and then my Shen up front to be a tank, and hope that I can stay alive long enough to get my 3rd Astral. So we'll jump ahead just a bit to show you that I ended up getting the spatula, which I'm going to take no matter what, because that is going to make the Tactician's Crown, and I'm able to get the Skarner, so now I can have my 3 Astrals in the game. For the second set of augments, I get Offered Ascension. As I've mentioned, that is also a very strong augment for this comp. especially since now in this one I'm going to have an extra player on the board, so hopefully some more healing, longer time, I can keep things locked up in front. And as you can see, the goal remains the same: Deathblade, Rageblade, Runin's Hurricane. I make them as soon as possible, put them on my item holder as I look for Varus. And let me take a moment to talk about something that's come up in my other video. People have told me do not roll early because you have a lower percentage chance of getting 3s, and they're somewhat correct. The one problem is this build is very competitive. As you can see, other people run it, and times when I have held my gold until late stage 6 or early stage 7, there just aren't necessarily enough Varuses to go around. In this case, my augments help me out and I'm able to win, but that was with a 1-star Varus. I'm just hoping that I'm able to knock out the other players and get the Varuses I need. For my third set of augments, I end up with an interesting choice. Usually intercosmic gifts this late in the game isn't that helpful, but because I'm lacking 2 critical Varus items, I decide to go for it. Those cosmic gifts, along with some lucky rolling, got me pretty much everything I was looking for. I was even able to get a Soraka in thanks to the Tactician's Crown and Rage Wing along with Hecarim, so that I could put together exactly the build the way I wanted it to look, and this is pretty much it. You can see how the Ascension works along with Thrill of the Hunt and helps keep Varus alive, because he's healing each time he kills someone and it allows him to stay in, finish off Xayah as our ghost team finishes off the opponent and leads to a victory. As we continue on our journey, I am again forced to lament the fact that I am forcing builds, because there's Volibear and Lee Sin and the perfect start for a Dragonmancer build, but that's not what we're doing. We refresh and there is nothing, so I decide to go with Three's Company and hope that I get a Varus or an Alawi, and nope, not gonna get any of that, so I've got to put away everything I think this could be and focus on getting my 3 Astrals. I can use Vladimir, I can end up using Nami. It doesn't have to be Nidalee, although I'd rather have a Nidalee than a Vladimir. I find her more effective, especially for holding the items for Varus. She's much more effective with them. So once I find the Nidalee, it's time to say goodbye to Varus and start loading her up with the Varus items. As we head into our second set of augments, we're doing okay. We've managed to get a Varus, so we're still looking for an Alawi, but we have picked up a Hecarim, so we have that early advantage of being able to get Rage Wing in there once we find a Xayah. I like Twitch better than Ezreal at this point unless I had an Ornn. If I had an Ornn, I would keep Ezreal in there, but Twitch gives you that guild bonus, which increases the attack speed for the entire team. It's time for the final augment, and we get the shot at Ascension, which, as I mentioned, is a really good one, although I was really tempted by Portable Forge, but if you get the wrong item for Portable Forge, you're pretty much done. I can now put out my 4 Bruisers, and because I have Swiftshot Heart, I have the 4 Swiftshot. The main difference now is because I have the Swiftshot Heart, I'm not going to be using Hecarim to create Rage Wing, because I'm going to be putting all 5 of the Swiftshots into the game, because that will take me up to 6. And this is one of those matches that shows why I like the healing augments so much. I felt like I was in a good position, although I didn't have a 2-star Xayah. I had her in the match because I like her better even as 1-star than the 2-star Ashe, but without healing, it's very hard to keep your swift shots up once they break through into your back line. And you can see right here that sort of everything ends up falling apart once they get to us, and we end up going out in 5th place. Luckily, 5th is not a huge loss in terms of points. We're right back into the grind, and unfortunately there were no Astrals with decent items, so I ended up grabbing a Senna with a sword just because it's part of the Varus collection. I'm really happy to see the 700 Thrill of the Hunt. Again, when I see that, I feel like I've basically just guaranteed myself a top 4. Of course, I'm going to need to get my 3 Astrals to get this build even started. At this point, I'm looking for Nidalee. There she is. And then I can slam onto her the Varus items I have, which in this case is the Rage Blade, and then ultimately put the sword on as one part of the Death Blade. It's time for our second augment, and we get an interesting selection. Featherweights doesn't really work that well in this build since your carries are 3 costs. Sunfire Board does because it weakens the team you're going against. Of course, the moment you get a chance to pick up the Varus, you dump whoever your item holder is and get the Varus in to stay as your 3rd Astral. Currently, we are holding on really well in this match and up to our 3rd augment, which if you've been following along so far, you know Ascension is the way to go here. It's going to help your team since your front line is going to keep things in place, allowing your back line to power up, and along with the thrill of the hunt, it's going to make everything exceptionally powerful. We have all the elements here. We have the swift shots we need because we can replace Ashe with Xayah once we can put in Hecarim, and then we will also get Ragewing. But there is no guarantee with any build. Sometimes when the stars align for another team, as in this case where you have a 2-star Ao Shin, you're going to run into some trouble. We had positioned around this a couple of times. I had just moved everyone over from the right to the left to try to keep from getting caught up in Sona's ult followed by Ao Shin's. But it really doesn't matter. Even with as much damage as we're doing, as you can see, a 2-star Ao Shin can just wipe out a team, and Xayah gives it a real try, but ultimately we end up finishing in 2nd place. Still positive LP and can't complain about it. Here we start with another spatula game, which I always like to see. I just want to get my hands on any Astral who has a spatula and then hope I'm going to be able to pick up a Tactician's Crown later on. And luckily, I don't have to wait too long. I get the shot at the Earth Grab Bag, which is going to give me a spatula and some random items. That will immediately give me the Tactician's Crown, and I immediately find my 3 Astrals. So I'm feeling pretty good about the start of this game because I can begin it with an extra player on the board. As we head into the second set of augments, things are going pretty well. We have all 3 of our Astrals, our key Astrals I should say, with Varus, Illaoi, and Skarner. I have 2 of my Varus items, so I'm looking for something that can really take this to the next level. Celestial Blessing is okay, but wasn't exactly what I was looking for. I'm hoping for Thrill of the Hunt, but I just don't get it. I decide to go ahead and just go with the item grab bag as the, well, least offensive solution in hoping that I can do something with the item it gives me. It gives me the Rapid Fire Cannon, which is essentially 2 bows, so doesn't really help me that much, but on a swift shot, it'll at least make sure that they don't miss. Now this game gets a little wild because I got another spatula off an NPC and then a Tome of Traits. I decide here, go with the guild emblem because that will give me team-wide Omnivamp. So it's going to help the entire team with some healing since I haven't gotten a healing augment yet. For the final set of augments, I'm really hoping for a healing augment, but no, it's not there. So I go with the random shot that is Tome of Traits because I have some interesting possibilities, especially since I still have the spatula on the bench. These emblems can give me a 2nd guild emblem, which is going to increase the number of guild on the team, which will increase the percentage of the bonus that I'm getting. So the Omnivamp will be a little bit higher once I have that. Now I can tell you this was a pretty wild game. As you can see, I'm down near the bottom of the charts and in danger of going out. I have turned Illaoi into a Ragewing at this point, so I currently have 4 Ragewings because Hecarim's in the match. I have not been able to find a Soraka yet, but I'm clinging into the game and I've been considering taking this game and making it its own video. If that's something you want to see, please leave a comment below and let me know and I will work on it, but I didn't want to do it outside of this particular video because it would kind of be a spoiler for the middle. But as you can see here, I hold on until the end when there's 3 of us left, and I end up bringing in a Shyvana, which now gave me 6 Ragewings. So my Ragewings are getting additional Omnivamp on top of the guild bonus. I end up fighting a team that also has a 3-star Varus, but also an Aurelion Soul. This is where Omnivamp has helped so much for the team because my Varus is able to get through their Varus, stay alive, then go and check in on the other player who I'm afraid I'm going to have to face in the final battle. But the team I was facing was strong enough to get through them, leaving me as the ultimate winner and another first place in my run to hyper. And just to show you the number of points you are getting and how much different it is, remember earlier we were getting 350 points for a first win, it's now down to 150, so it's much harder to climb now. Sadly, the next match got interrupted by a work phone call, so I didn't end up recording it or playing it all the way through. I think I ended up in 6th place and it set me back about 75 points, so it just made it a couple more extra games I'm going to have to play in order to get up to hyper. But in this match, it also started me off without any astrals or any decent augments on the first try. After I reroll, I have a really interesting choice between preparation and weak spot. I decide to go with weak spot because I have found that the most effective in these circumstances. Even though preparation will give you more raw power, the ability to shred armor I particularly find more helpful. I'm still looking for those 3 starting astrals so I can get going, but they're being elusive this time. When you don't get them, sometimes you just have to go with a couple of them and then whatever your strongest board is. After a rough start, I'm now floating in the middle of the pack. I get augments that again are not exactly what I want. Pandora's items is decent in that it will allow me to absolutely guarantee getting my Varus items, but I really like to have some type of healing augment in this comp, something that's going to really bring it home. By the time we got to the 3rd augment, I'm doing pretty well towards the top of the charts. I have the choice between Titanic Strength or Swiftshot Crest. I decide to go with the Swiftshot Crest so that I can put an additional Swiftshot on the board. And in these cases, I will usually choose Illaoi to be the additional Swiftshot because that will allow her to attack from the back and do more damage overall. You can actually move her all the way to the back row and she will be able to hit their front line and her tentacles will reach out and touch someone, I guess you could say. If you ever get this opportunity, my goal in turning Illaoi into a Swiftshot is then to stack damage items on. Here I got another Death Blade, and so since I'm hoping to get her up to 3 stars, that will give her much more attack damage. You can see that it's fairly effective. My front line can still hold them mostly in place, and the back line will speed up accordingly based on the hexes and do a ton of damage. Although I thought I was doing pretty well in this match, I end up running into someone touched by the hand of Gary. As you can see, they have multiple mage hats, cavalier emblems. They are just a really blessed mage, trainer, cavalier, throw everything at it team, and they can overcome the amount of attack speed I have, the weak spot and everything else, and push me down into 2nd place. But again, 2nd place is still good because it's positive LP. And as I'm climbing, I can't help but notice that it's getting harder and harder to start off with astrals. Everyone seems to be grabbing them right off the carousel, so sometimes I'm forced to take other measures, such as getting this Heimer and starting to use him as the item holder until I can get everything I need. Opportunity for a Swiftshot heart, I take it, just because that will allow me to get up to 6, but I am having trouble finding the astrals I need, and while I'm able to get my Swiftshots, without 3 astrals it isn't going to matter, and I just don't have them yet. So this match will have to start off with 2 Swiftshots and then just a Skarner up front. And just to give you an idea of how rough it's becoming, here we are at 4-2 and I still haven't gotten my 3rd astral. I have my 2 Swiftshots, I have a couple of bruisers, I have 2 Varus items on the bench, but no one I can use as an item holder right now because it just won't make any sense to put it on an Ashe or an Ezreal who I don't necessarily want to get rid of, especially since I have the Swiftshot heart. I'm going to want to keep all of my swift shots, and I don't want to have to sell one to possibly take the items off and put them onto Varus. Luckily, I am holding up and staying towards the top of the health charts. It's time for our second set of augments, and I get the opportunity to grab Titanic Strength, which again is fairly good on this build. Since your front line is bruisers, they're going to have high health, which will mean they'll do additional damage. In this particular build, since I have a swift shot heart, that will give us 6 swift shots, so the attacks will be faster from the backline. As you can see, I finally at least found a 1-star Nidalee to hold items, but I am desperately searching for more of the astrals I need. Finally get the Illaoi to fill in, but Varus is proving particularly hard to find. Once we get rid of that, we don't need Vladimir anymore, but we're a little bit set, at least for the moment. It's time for our final augment, and I get some interesting choices. Sunfire board is interesting, but I have a Sunfire cape on Skarner, so I don't want to necessarily use it. I go with the intercosmic gifts, even though I have 2 of my 3 Varus items, and I hate getting this late in the game as it doesn't always equal as much, but it was the best option I had given what my choices were. At least I've now gotten all the astrals I need, and I'm setting up for the future. And having now played this bunch, I'm starting to question the value of having 6 swift shots versus getting the Rage Wing onto Xayah. I think that is probably more powerful than the 6 swift shots, although as you can see, this game came down to Astral Swift Shots versus Astral Swift Shots, and I just ended up in second place, which is still positive LP. Back into the grind, and I'm able to at least get a couple of astrals and 1 off of the carousel. I got the Nidalee with the needlessly large rod. Again, any piece of the Varus items that you can get on an item holder, you just go ahead and go for it. Get 2 swift shots out of the NPC round, and then I have 2 good choices between Best Friends or Ascension, but between those 2, I will choose Best Friends since it will give you good attack speed increases later on in the match. It's time for the second augment, and I'm really happy to see Thrill of the Hunt. Although it's just the 400 variety, it still helps a ton in helping to keep your team up. I'm going to ultimately take the Vlad and move him down next to Varus so that Varus can have increased attack speed going into the next fight. With Best Friends, it's really good to give it more to your backline than your front line, but in the end, you'll see how this all gets set up. I've explained it before, but it can't hurt to show it again. The third augment is really tricky. Swift Shot Crest should seem like a good idea, but since I'm running Best Friends, it's going to be very hard to position everyone. I end up going with the Big Friend 2. This will allow my front line along with the Best Friends to be even stronger. Now in this case, I end up putting everyone next to Skarner, even though it's going to remove their Best Friend augment for now. It's going to help them in terms of them taking less damage. Once I get more out there, I can split them up. And this is kind of the key of using Big Friend and Best Friend together. With Skarner next to Illaoi, they are going to help each other, and Ornn is going to help out Shen. Since Shen is still 1 star, he's not over 2,000. But it gives everyone reduced damage take in front, increased armor, and increased attack speed, especially from the back. You can see again how effective this is as they just tear through other teams without taking too much damage. In this game, the augments worked out absolutely perfectly. I ended up going up against one of my favorite builds, the Volibear Legend build with all the right items. But what I had put together was just too strong even for that, because with the Thrill of the Hunt, with the Best Friends, with the Big Friends taking the reduced damage, we're getting just enough healing, just enough armor, just enough attack speed to take them down and ultimately take them out, sealing a first place victory. Now I'm going to let this play through because as you can see, this game ends up becoming pretty important on our journey, and I'd love to say that it gets easier going forward, but it doesn't. But this game is the one that took us into purple. We're now down to getting 150 points for a win, and it's going to go down even more as we continue to climb. And we can savor our victory into what essentially is platinum tier for a moment, but then it's back to the grind, where we were able to get an Italy off the next carousel with a sword and quickly make our death blade. And luckily, we're able to pull an Alawi out of the NPC round, so we're pretty close to being set for our astrals. We just need to find a Skarner. Our first set of augments are interesting, not exactly what I want, but second wind definitely helps in this comp, especially if your front line is able to hold up for the full 10 seconds. If not, then yeah, it kind of goes to waste, but usually they are, especially in late game. The second set of augments, well, they're not at all what I'm hoping for. None of these are going to be really that helpful, so I roll, and not much better. For the first time this season, I decide to give Gadget Expert a chance, which gives a 40% damage bonus as true damage to direct damage items. The question is, what are the direct damage items? Clearly, Static Shiv counts a direct damage item because they give it to you, but I'm not sure what else. Now, I'll tell you the little hint of how to find out. It says it at the bottom of the item when you mouse over it. But what are the other direct damage items? I did this research after this match, so I wasn't sure going into it, but they are the Static Shiv for one, the Runan's Hurricane is a direct damage item. Not the Death Blade, which is what I thought would be, but this is still going to help this build because the Runan's Hurricane is. The Ionic Spark is a direct damage item, and the Bramble Vest is a direct damage item. Not the Sunfire Cape. So I didn't know when I was playing this, but I looked it up after, and it will be really useful for this build, especially since you're going to be using Runan's Hurricane as one of your main items. And you will see at the end of this round, when you look at the damage charts, that Varus is doing additional true damage. As we head into the third augment, we are doing really well. I decide to go with Intercosmic Gifts because, again, I'm starting to learn that getting the Swiftshot crest is not necessarily a great thing for this build. Having 6 Swiftshots is not the same as having that additional Rage Wing in, especially for Xayah, so I'm tending to stay away from it unless it's my only choice. With these additional gifts, I feel like I might be able to pick up additional items that I can turn into more powerful things for my front line. And those gifts have led to a lot of Static Shivs, which is the one thing at this moment when I was playing this game I knew for 100% sure was a direct damage item. So I put it on every single Swiftshot that I could to make sure I was doing the additional damage. And as you can see, it helped out as I was facing other Astral Swiftshot teams. Unfortunately, as you climb, you are going to find a lot more of these builds out there, the Bruiser Swiftshot combination, and so I could not find a third Xayah to 2-star her. So my backline was not as strong as it absolutely could be, but they did have their 2-star Xayah and a Soraka, and were able to knock me back down into second place. So we get offered our first set of augments, and yeah, there's nothing here. I consider Loot Master, but I'd need 2 guild members, and this build does not have 2 guild members, so we re-roll and get nothing that helps this build. We could go Cybernetic Shell or Luden's Echo. I wish there was another roll, but I just decide to go with Luden's Echo because Ezreal does cast often, so maybe it'll do some additional damage. As we head into our second augment, we are struggling, but at least Best Friends has a chance of making this better. It's a great augment for this build simply because of how it all works, as I've explained a few times, and not going to waste your time again. We've now managed to get our Varus items mostly together. We just need a bow, and we're hoping for the third augment to be something that's going to help bring this up. Pandora's items is not going to help. Astral Heart is completely useless, so we just go with Stand United. That will give us a few additional damage points onto Varus and hopefully allow us to crawl out of the basement of this game. And I'll tell you right now, this was a real struggle beginning to end. We were not able to 3-star any of our units due to the number of Astral teams out there. We weren't able to get a Hecarim to finish out the Rage Wing, so we had to go with a Swain. In reality, given the fact that we were also battling someone with a Tactician's Crown and no 3-star units, I was happy just to have made it into the top 4 and secure a 4th place finish and just gain 20 LP. Heading into the next match, I'm able to get a Vladimir with a Chain Vest. Again, this is something I will take because I can turn it into a Sunfire Cape and ultimately put it on Skarner when it's time to get rid of Vlad. For my first augment, I get Preparation 2, which is a pretty good one for this build. As we've described before, it allows your stronger units to power up before going into the match. We decide to go ahead and grab Nami as one of our Astral units, and also we ended up getting an Illaoi out of the NPC round, so we have a pretty good starting team of Astrals. Heading into the second augment, we're running middle of the pack, so we're looking pretty good. But none of these are really going to work, so we're going to roll, try our luck, and we get Thrill of the Hunt, which again is one of my favorites, although I'd rather have the 700 one. We've gotten a 2-star Varus, gotten at least an item on him, and are going to go ahead and put the BF sword on and waiting for that second BF sword for the Deathblade. And when you're running preparation, make sure you keep an eye on your bench. If you have a fully prepared unit, go ahead and swap them in. So it is time for our third set of augments, and what are 3 things I do not want? Bruiser Crest just isn't going to help here. I decide to go with Blue Battery because maybe having them cast a little more often will be helpful, but this is not a high cast build, so I would generally not go for that unless it's last resort. I could have grabbed Bruiser Crest for Hecarim, which would have doubled the health bonus for him, but I feel unless I'm taking it up to 6, which it would not take it to 6, it's just not worth doing. And I just want to show you this next fight and say again why I like Thrill of the Hunt so much on this build. This is a really strong trainer pick comp that we are going up against with a really good tank up front in Tom Kench. It looks like it's going bad, but each time someone gets knocked out, my team reheals, leaving it down to Varus, who was able to finish everything off and seal the win. This round, we're able to get all of our elements in place. We find our 2-star Xayah, we have our 3-star Illaoi and our 3-star Varus, and with Thrill of the Hunt, again, they are able to heal at critical times to stay in fights. So even against a Rage Wing team, we are able to overtake them and secure the first place victory. The amount of points we're getting for a victory continues to drop. I think for this one we only got about 120 points. So it's going to be getting harder and harder to reach our goal. The next game begins with a Prismatic Augment, and I am really torn. Triforce 3 is fantastic. Again, you have 2 3-cost carries on this, but I feel like there may be a team expansion if I hit refresh, but it could also be a lot worse, so I go ahead and take that. I often find when I see these Prismatic Augments that someone else is getting new recruit and they have a huge jump on the game. The other problem with Triforce is you're going to lose a lot early because you don't have your 3 costs yet. They come later in the match, so your first few rounds, your augment is not doing much for you. In this case, I decide to go with Pandora's items because I am having trouble finding Varus items. And with Triforce, I'm going to need those Varus items. But again, this is one of those augments that is not going to instantly pay off. It's going to take time. So I'm going to need this to play out long game and hope that I can hang on. As we're hitting mid-game, we're really starting to find our stride, but of course, we're gonna find other teams like this. Another Astral Bruiser team, and I'm seeing them more and more often. Luckily, my augments at this point are helping more than theirs are, because I was able to get all of the Varus items, and my Triforce is giving him more power, allowing me to win, although I envy that thrill of the hunt that they have, and I hope I can get it as a third augment. And it's time to get that third augment, and Portable Forge, it can be a real winner or loser depending on what you get. I can take Randium Sanctum or Infinity Force. Both will help me. One will give me a much stronger front line. The other one I can put on Xayah and make her that much stronger. I decide to go with strengthening up the back line over having a clump of strength in the front line, and rely instead on my bruisers to just be a wall. And this match comes down to a 1v1 against someone who got the prismatic Ornn items, meaning they were able to get 2 items from the Portable Forge, and that was just too much to stand up against. I tried to position in such a way that their Blitzcrank hand wouldn't destroy me, but I end up in second place. Our very next game again gives us prismatic augments to start, and while I'm tempted to re-roll, it can get worse. So I decide to go with the Radiant Relics and hope I can get something really strong. I was really looking for something that would give me health regeneration in my front line, but the Rose Thorn Vest does not do that, so I decide to go with the Eternal Whisperer and hope that I can get that onto Xayah later in the game, and it will allow her to absolutely shred the opposing team's armor. It's time for our second augment, and there's my thrill of the hunt. Again, would rather have the 700 one, but it's great. I am also able to pick up a Varus, and I can switch Nidalee out. The only problem is that Eternal Whisperer is going to be sitting on the sidelines until I get an Ashe or a Xayah I can put it on, because I don't want it on Twitch or Ezreal. So for the moment, my Radiant Relic is going to be hanging off to the side until I can get the right champion. For the third augment, I have a choice between Ascension or Second Wind. They work great together, but if I have to choose between the two, I'm going to go with Ascension, because I'm hoping my front line is going to be strong enough to hold them back long enough for the back line to power up. With Thrill of the Hunt, that will end up sealing the entire deal. I can finally get my Eternal Whisperer back into the game as I finally find an Ashe. I'm now looking for a Xayah so that this 2-star Hecarim I have will ultimately make sense. And I'm finally able to get my 2-star Xayah and get her in, and we end up squared off against a Mage Trainer team. And I think if they had different items, if they had switched their Nami items with their Rise items, they probably would have beaten us, but Xayah is able to absolutely destroy them and finish off their Rise, who just didn't have the power to do it, and give us first place. And at this point, we are getting so close to our goal, I can almost taste it, with 122 additional points, bringing us close to 4,000. And just as I felt everything was headed in the right direction, we ran into this game, which is going to showcase the problem of trying to do videos like this one. It all seemed like I was starting off okay, getting a Nidalee with a rod, so I have the beginning of a Varus item. First set of augments gives me preparation, so as I've mentioned before, this is a really good augment for this build, so I think I'm in pretty good shape once, of course, I can get my 3 Astrals in. And while this seems to be progressing as a normal game, it becomes apparent very quickly that every single player is going Astral. Every single player is going Astral. And people have started to notice it, and you can see that someone comments, "This is the dumbest lobby they've seen yet," which will quickly be followed by an "I know, right? But I'm stuck. I can't change from this build, or else I'll ruin this entire experiment. And we'll just roll the clown music, because unlike every other game in this series, I'm not going to bother with the augments or the items or anything like that. Just know it was Astral Team after Astral Team that we were facing, and everyone in the lobby pretty much knew it. There were occasional people who were smart enough to move off it, but I couldn't, for the purpose of this video that you're watching right now. And I did my best to try and come back from it, but as you can see, we're in 7-1 and I still haven't even gotten a Varus. And while I'm still able to win here and there for the most part, as I'm running into people who got luckier and have the right augments and the right champions, they're able to take me out. There's just not much you can do about it when you're facing Astral Team after Astral Team, because in the end, you're not going to get the champions you need. And even as I enter my very last fight, notice I still have a 1-star Varus. And although I have all the right items, I managed to run into one of the people who was smart enough to back away from Astrals early, head over into Rage Wing, and is easily able to take us out, despite the fact we have preparation, and we have Eternal Winter, and we have a Swiftshot Heart. It all doesn't matter, because I couldn't get the Varus I needed to help me win, and I go out in 6th and lose a heck of a lot of points. But of course, you have to go into this knowing that if you're going to be this dogmatic about something, you're ultimately going to get stuck in a situation like that. And I knew it was going to happen. I just had this dream as I was crossing 4,000 or getting close to it that maybe it wouldn't, but it did, and I have to make up for it. By the time I'm recording this match, I have now learned what the direct damage items are and how Gadget Expert works, and that it can be really effective in this build, especially since Varus has the Runin's Hurricane. But I always like healing augments, so Celestial Blessing was certainly a temptation, but I decide to go with the gadgets and hope that I can make a lot of static shivs and then get my 3-star Varus with the Runin's Hurricane and do lots of true damage. As we head into our next set of augments, I am pleased to see the Intercosmic Gifts, because this is going to allow me the chance, hopefully, if they give me the right gifts, of making a lot of static shivs along with finishing off my Varus items much more easily than I otherwise would be able to. Heading into the 3rd augment, I'm a little afraid my strategy is backfiring on me as I'm towards the bottom of the health charts, but I go ahead and pick up Best Friends, and that way I can increase the attack speed coming from the champions. I can also go looking for additional items with my special gift augment, and I'm holding 2 tiers on the side and not making into a blue buff in the hopes that I can get a couple of bows to turn those into static shivs. And this game actually looked really ugly for a while, but I learned my lesson in terms of what to use as direct damage items, so I spread out static shivs, put a Bramble Vest onto Ilaoi, and I was able to hold on and get into the top 4. But an Ao Shin at 2 stars was just too much to handle, so I end up going out 3rd place. I was very happy to see the next game start and me get a Varus right out of the NPC round, and also 3 of the key components of the Varus items, so I just need a couple of bows and another sword to get it rolling. Celestial Blessing isn't bad, Second Wind 1 isn't bad, but I went ahead and rolled in the hopes I'd find something better, and that was a fail. But I feel like Electrocharge can work since I am running a strong front line by the time I'm done with this comp. As I'm all the way at the bottom, I'm looking for something in the 2nd augment that will help with the first one that I got forced into taking because I rolled. Bruiser Heart will do that. because now I can go to 6 bruisers, which will be a really nice buff for my front line. As we head into the third augment, I've stopped the bleeding a little bit, but not enough. Best Friends 2 is the best thing I could have hoped for at this point, because it will now make that front line even tankier, giving them a little extra armor and additional attack speed. Hopefully that will help make up for the electro charge that I started with. And those last 2 augments made all the difference. As you can see, I'm now up to 6 bruisers. My front line is really tanky, especially with the Best Friends increasing their armor. It allows the back line plenty of time and is doing enough damage up front to make things low enough that Varus can end up finishing them off, and it allows me to get this game into first place. And we're finally back on track after some rather upsetting games. We got knocked down a lot, and as you know, you keep getting less and less as you get higher. Luckily, at this point, I'm still getting just over 100 points. So as long as nothing catastrophic happens, I'm just a couple of games away, and there it is, my 700 Thrill of the Hunt that we all know I love so much. And I've got my 3 Astrals, and I'm well on my way to the items that I want, so I feel like this is going to be a good game. The one thing that's scaring me is I am running into a lot of Astral teams, and while I have a couple of the items that I really want and my absolutely favorite augment for this build, this is the 3rd Astral team I've run into. So far I've managed to beat most of them, but it tells me that it might get difficult down the line, especially in the mid-game. Although the funny thing for me is that Vladimir with a Rage Blade has been doing surprisingly well, as his cast gives him health and allows him to stay in. Next set of augments are Prismatic. An easy choice. I will always take New Recruit if I get the option, and I also got the ability, an additional Bruiser emblem, which will allow me to go up to 6 bruisers this time around, which will make my front line that much stronger, which is going to be important. As we head into the 3rd augment, I'm a little disappointed with where I am ranked right now, given the augments I have I feel I should be doing. I quickly take the Press the Attack over the Intercosmic Gifts because I simply don't need them. I'm only 1 item away from what I need for Varus, so getting additional items just won't make a difference. And it's funny, when you're playing and scrambling to get things together, you don't notice stuff, but right now I noticed there was a Hecarim at the bottom I could have picked up and put the Bruiser emblem on, which would have made Hecarim the Bruiser and allowed me to also get Rage Wing along with the 6 bruisers. Luckily, I do catch my mistake, pick up the Hecarim I need, and use my Magnetic Remover to get the Bruiser emblem off of Ezreal and over to Hecarim, where it will do a lot more good. And thanks to catching the error, the Press the Attack, and everything else I was able to do, it came down to a 1v1, so I'm guaranteed at least a 2nd place. But the other team we end up against is just so tanky that even with Press the Attack, the 2-star Xayah, the 3-star Varus with the Death Blade and all the right items, it just doesn't matter. They are able to get through us, but it's a 2nd place, positive LP, and we're not going back again. And I know at this point I just need to stay in the top 2 for 2 games, and I'll get into Hyper. But there's no guarantee. I've had a couple fall out of that, and so I'm hoping I'm not stuck in this for a long time. Our first augment here, get to choose from some. Portable Forge is probably the best option unless I'm going to roll it. Although I wish I had gotten better ones, I was very torn between the Gold Collector or the rocket-propelled Fist. The Fist will take things from the corner, bring them in as if I had a Blitzcrank on the team, and that can really disrupt another team, so I decide to go that direction. Since I got an Alawi out of the NPC round, I feel pretty good having my 2 bruisers up front and now only needing 1 more Astral to complete the entire build. If given a choice, I'd rather have Nidalee than Vladimir, so I can get rid of him, put in Nidalee, throw the bow onto Nidalee as part of the items for Varys and give Illaoi a Warmogs and make them as strong as possible. And I want to show you the first 2 matches from this game because I got pretty concerned pretty quickly. First match, another Astral team. And I've been noticing as I've been climbing higher, I'm seeing Astral swiftshot bruiser builds more and more. And this first one had me concerned because they already had the Illaoi and would have been able to beat me, but for squeaking it out at the end. The second team has a Varys with a mage cap on, so they're kind of headed in the same direction, although they might be headed more mage, thinking of switching to Asol, but it's still another Astral team that I'm going to be battling with for all the things I need. For the second set of augments, I'm met with a choice I've had before. Celestial Blessing 1 versus Big Friend 1. Big Friend did work out last time, but this time I decide to go with Celestial Blessing because I want to make sure I have some healing on this team, especially since I'm going to be pulling people into that front line so quickly. For the third augment, it is a prismatic augment, and I'm pretty happy to see Best Friends 3 because that will actually end up enhancing the healing that I have since they will be attacking faster, and it will also allow my front line to get a little tankier. Had I gone with Big Friend, yes, it would have made the front line a little stronger, but I wouldn't have had the healing that I'm probably going to need in the back line to stay alive, especially against additional Astral teams. As you can see in this case, the Treasure Dragon ended up being a complete bust for me. I really needed a Deathblade or something to enhance the power of Varys' attacks. I'm 1 away from gold, but I still am going to need something to make him stronger. I decide to go with a radical choice, and I load up Skarner with a bunch of items and reforge them in the hopes that I get exactly what I need. When I get the Obsidian Cleaver, I feel that can take the place of the Deathblade on Varys and make his attacks absolutely devastating. And ultimately the answer is yes, I'm going to get in the top 2 because this game comes down to 2 people basically running the same build. Astral Bruiser Swiftshot against Astral Bruiser Swiftshot. Their team has a pretty big advantage in that they got the high roller for their prismatic augment, and that was able to give them the 2-star Xayah, which I do not have. They also have an additional Zeke's Herald on their Xayah, which is enhancing their Varys. But my Varys is pretty strong with his extra attacks, so I have a decent chance of winning the whole thing. And this one is ultimately the longest hyper roll game I have ever played, as we went all the way into stage 10, round 2, where we got an additional item. I was ultimately able to 2-star the Xayah, and I thought I had a really good chance of winning. But it really came down to a lot of luck and how each thing fell out. We're running the exact same comp against the exact same comp. Who gets that critical hit, who gets that right stun, and in this case, they pull the stun and finish me off with just a little bit of health left, but it's a second place, and I thought maybe, just maybe, it would be enough points to get me into hyper, so we wait for the result, and 2 points out. So we get to go into this game knowing all we need to do is get into the top 4. Anything in the top 4 is good enough, but it has to be with the build we've been using this whole time. And if we run into another clown game where everyone is doing the same build, well, it might be a bit of a problem. And I was forced to take a Skarner with a sword to start. And luckily, I immediately get another Skarner that I can pick up along with a Nidalee. I can sell the Skarner, replace it, put Nidalee in, and put the Deathblade on her, so I'm good to go. The first set of augments are not exactly what I'd like. I could try Tome of Traits, but I figure it's better to roll, and I get the Intercosmic Gifts, which are amazing to get early because now I'm pretty much assured of getting the Varus items I need, and I have the 3 Astrals I need to make it all work out. It's time for the second set of augments, and I am super excited to see the 700 Thrill of the Hunt. I couldn't have clicked that any faster. I've managed to get Varus in, I've got Alawi, I've got Skarner, although he's not even up at 2 stars yet, but I have everything I need to go forward. There's my 2-star Skarner, and I keep picking up items that will help me build this team up. Heading into the third augment, I'm hoping for Best Friends or something like that. None of these are really all that helpful. Dragon Alliance is useless for me. I end up just taking makeshift armor because that will allow my front line to be a little tankier even if I don't put items onto them. So it will make me not have to itemize Alawi and Shen and Ornn if I don't want to. And I feel like I have everything rolling in my favor right now. I've got my 3-star gold Varus, I've got my 3-star gold Alawi, I've got my 2-star silver Xayah. And if I can get through this team, I know I'm guaranteed to get into the top 4. And so this will do it and guarantee me a trip into Hyper. And there it is, the win I need, which will ultimately take us into the top 4 and a guaranteed trip into the Hyper tier. But the question becomes, how far can we push it? And unless we notice otherwise, what team are we facing in the top 2? But another Astral, Bruiser, Swiftshot team. You see them a lot, the higher you get. Believe me, you just watched it. And while our builds are very similar, they have a couple of distinct advantages. We both have Thrill of the Hunt, 700, but they also have the Portable Forge, so they have that Black Cleaver on their Varus, which is shredding my front line's armor, and Stand United, which is giving them additional damage so they can get through my team. And of course, in completely dramatic fashion, they happen to have the Yasuo little legend that creates a dramatic finish. And as I say to them, there's only one build left in this game, and it's this one. But it will take you from 0 to Hyper if you let it. You don't really have to think about it too much. It will get you there. As you can see right here, in these games, we took this account from nothing up to Hyper in just a couple of days. For those who are interested in statistics, it took 27 games to go from 0 to Hyper. Now, we're not including the 2 games that kind of fell apart, one from the police, one from a phone call, so it might have taken less but for those games, but let's just go with the 27 games that it took. The average placement across all of those games was just over second place. It was 2.03 when you put the whole thing together, and if you average out the time, it took a total of about 10 hours to play those 27 games. You can do it. You want to donate a day to it? You can get to Hyper in 1 day using just this build. I did it in 3 because I didn't have 1 day where I could just sit down and do it all, but over the course of 3 days, made it from 0 to Hyper with 1 build. If you want to get to that goal, give it a shot. This build absolutely works, and I hope everyone who watched the video and is still here has an absolutely awesome day.